In this video, I'm going to make a Scab steamer for Scabz in a looted Warhammer 40K Orc style. Many of the techniques used in this video are the same as used in the one for the grot tanks. The tin is first sanded both inside and out, though I'm not bothering to sand the bottom. Make sure you take measures against the dust. I'm using a wet sanding sponge and a face mask. Once done, I rinse and dry the tin. The top is going to be graphics medium chipboard because I want something a bit stronger than the cardboard I normally use. I draw around the tin onto the chipboard, then draw around the lid, then cut it out with kitchen shears. I want it between the two so it rests on the lip. Though this might be strong enough on its own, I want some extra reinforcing. I cut a piece of single corrugated card 2.5 cm high and 19 cm long. I bend it and stick the ends together with tape. This size avoids the raised areas inside the tin. I then add more pieces with the corrugations running at 90 degrees to the outside with wood glue, which adds more strength. This is then stuck inside the can with superglue. The top is stuck on with wood glue on the card riser and superglue on the edges. Taking the lid again, I draw around it on some thick packaging card. I cut this out outside the line, trimming it to fit, and then divide it into 8. These pieces are cut out and glued to the chipboard. I butt them up to the edges to leave seams between them as if they're decking. The turret is made from 5 layers of corrugated cardboard, 3.5 cm square, each layer at 90 degrees to the other to add strength. They are glued together with wood glue. This is the same method used in the grot tanks. Once set, I clad the entire turret in thick food packaging cardboard. I cut the pieces roughly to size, stick them on with wood glue, and then trim off the excess. If there are any gaps, I fill them in with a ready mix filler, but in this case it's not necessary. The turret is going to be attached with a magnet, so it can rotate and also be removed. Just as with the grot tanks, I have punched holes in card and added a magnet. I have some pairs of these already made. The guns I'm making from two sizes of paper straw. This smaller one fits inside the larger. These will be attached to the turret with bamboo skewers. First, I cut a length of the smaller straw at 1.5 inches. I need 2 of these and of everything else. Then a length of the longer straw at 3/4 of an inch, and I glue the smaller straw inside it. Next, I cut a length of skewer at 1.5 inches. I cut a strip of paper 1/2 inch wide. I cut this into pieces, gluing it to the skewer and wrapping it around until it's big enough that it fits just inside the straws. Then I glue the end and glue it inside the straw. I cut 2 more strips of paper 12 cm long by 3 mm wide. These are wrapped around the end of the paper straws. Finally, I add some of these 1mm cardboard discs as rivets, as they're easier to put on now than later when everything's assembled. With that done, I mark 2 places to drill holes for the skewers, drill a pilot hole, and then a full-size one. Then apply wood glue to the skewer and the base of the gun and glue them into place. I want the turret a bit higher, so I made a small base for it, which I don't appear to have recorded me doing. This is made from 2 3cm squares of single corrugated cardboard, again at 90 degrees to each other, and I clad it in the same way, though the bottom will be left free of cladding. Once done, I glue the other turret magnet to it. The main superstructure at the back is next. I want to leave some space behind it for exhausts, which will be made with the larger straws. Once again, this is done by gluing corrugated card together at 90 degrees to each other. The base will be 8 layers of 4 by 4.5 centimeters. The top is narrower and wider, made from 7 layers of 3 by 6 centimeters. Once again, this will be clad in the same way. This is now done, and there are a few gaps I'm going to use the filler to hide. Once dry, I wipe off the excess with the damp finger. With the main bits done, I'm going to do the specific extras that are going to be stuck on. First is the hatches. I want 2 of these. I glue a 12mm cardboard disc on top of a 16mm one. Then cut a 3mm wide strip of card and glue it down as a hinge. Cutting off the excess when set. Rivets and a handle need adding, but I will do these and those for the other add-ons with the rest of this ship once they are attached. This is going to be a mount for another turret, which will be added to the top of the structure. This will allow a secondary turret to be added if I want. I'm using 6mm by 1mm magnets. For the mount, I'm using 3 layers of 12mm discs and a 4th for the base. I stick 3 layers together and wait for that to set. Then I punch a hole through all 3 of them using the existing template to mark the hole. I then add a magnet, checking the polarity, to the hole and glue all 4 discs and magnet together, using superglue for the magnet and wood glue for the cardboard. However, because I might not always want there to be a turret there, I'm adding a blank to cover the magnet. For this, I'm using another magnet and 1 hole punch disc and a base. This will then be painted and decorated to match. Next, I have 2 sets of 2 16mm cardboard discs glued together, to appear like bolted over portholes once I add the rivets. For the front, I cut a 4cm by 1.5cm piece of thick card, then paint it with Mod Podge and black paint. Once dry, I cut a 2mm wide strip of that card and glue it around the edge with wood glue. I cut a piece of wire mesh using some more of my anti-rodent mesh that I first used in the Gabions video and superglue it in the space. I then cut a 3mm strip of card and glue this over the top around the edge. The final specific extra is the exhaust at the rear. I cut 3 pieces of the thick paper straw at 2 inches long so that they stick over the top of the structure at the rear. I cut a 1/2 inch piece of bamboo skewer, and a 1/2 inch strip of paper that's glued around the skewer. Once this is the right size and set, it's glued inside the paper straw. This adds more surface area to the base to help it stick. With these set, I drill holes in the straws. For the central straw, I drill 3 holes on one side, starting at 1/2 centimetre down and 1 centimetre apart, with one on the opposite side at 1/2 centimetre down. I do the same with the 2 side straws. I also add 3 holes on one of the other sides, a different side for each, starting 1 centimetre down and 1 centimetre apart. Around the sides of the steamer, I'm adding bits of graphics medium chipboard as makeshift armour plating. I want the strength of this cardboard, as opposed to the other types I've used, given its position. I cut a strip of chipboard 2 centimetres high. Then cut 12 2cm square pieces and cut bits off the corners and edges to make them look rougher. I cut 2 orc glyphs from the thick cardboard. And cut several rectangles from this piece of EVA foam. Then cut them into tooth shapes. Now it's time to start sticking everything together. I first glue some 3mm discs to the sides of the turret mount, as these will be hard to reach later. I glue the panel, hatch, weapon mount and side portholes to the structure. and the other hatch to the turret. With those done, I start cutting up pieces of odd-shaped cardboard and a few pieces of corrugated card to stick all over the turret and structure. I glue the structure down, making sure that there's enough room for the exhaust at the back. I'm not bothered if there are any small gaps on the join, as these will be fixed later. Then I glue the exhaust to the structure, each other and the base. I position where I want the turret and glue the turret mount down there. I then start supergluing the chipboard pieces as makeshift armour around the top of the hull, starting with 2 at the front and reinforcing the joins with superglue. I work my way around, though I didn't encircle the entire boat. I then superglue the teeth on at the front, starting in the middle. Next, I glue the 2 glyphs onto the 2 front panels. Then cut pieces of the thin card into shapes like I did elsewhere and glue them onto the chipboard panels, often using them to join 2 together. The next stage is riveting. I glue 8 1mm discs onto the magnet blank. Then do the same with the blocked portholes. I do something similar with the hatches, then add a 3mm disc to represent a handle. And add more 3mm discs to the turret mount and the deck. "3mm discs are used in the corners of the chipboard where there's space. Finally, I go everywhere else, adding 1mm discs in the corners of the thinner card and on the teeth and glyphs. With that all done, it's time to prime. First, I cover all the paper and cardboard parts in a 50-50 Mod Podge black paint mix to strengthen them. This will need more coats, as you can see, but this first coat reduces the chance of damage to the small rivets in particular, which are vulnerable until this point. Then I prime the metal bits. I'm using this black paint-on primer. Spray paint would work fine, but the weather wasn't cooperating. Then I go over everything else with the black paint Mod Podge again, including the primed bits. Next I'm going to add some texture paste. I mix together a small amount of baking soda, fine sand, Mod Podge and black paint. I paint this on around the main body to represent rust. And around the base to represent barnacles. If there are any gaps, I apply the paste there to hide them. I gave this another coat once the first had dried. With this done, finally it's time to paint. I'm using the painting style I used in the grot tanks. Stipple everything with burnt umber. Then do this again. A lighter stipple with burnt sienna. And a dry brush with gunmetal grey metallic to add a metallic feel. Next I paint the major panels green, but avoid the edges. With this, and all the other cheap paints used, multiple coats are needed. Then the chipboard armour is painted mostly blue. The other panels are painted with red. White is used in places where it will have white, and in places that would be painted yellow, as it makes the yellow need less coats. I add black squares to make checks to the white panels. And paint the teeth and glyphs yellow. Then paint the rivets on the teeth and glyphs with a gunmetal grey. I then dry brush it with silver metallic. Next, I'm doing something new to how the grot tanks were done. I'm going to do some heat bloom on the exhausts. Recommended colours are sepia, purple and blue. I'm using burnt sienna, purple and blue because that's what I have. First I stipple on some burnt sienna part way down. Then some purple, blending it with the previous colour. Then blue at the top, again blending it in. and finally brushing some black on the very top. This is quite a subtle effect, but it adds depth. Next for the rust, I'm first stippling it with burnt umber. I'm actually trying to get it on a bit past the texture paste. Then using a piece of torn sponge to dab burnt sienna on in the denser parts. And finally stipping on some orange in the very densest areas. With the barnacles, I first paint them with the burnt sienna. Then do a heavy dry brush of ochre yellow. And finally a lighter dry brush of tan. The last step in the painting is to dilute some black ink and go around the edges of the rivets and panels. And that's the painting done. It will need varnishing later. So here's the finished Scab steamer. Do you know what the glyphs mean? Answer in the comments below to win absolutely nothing. The magnet blank can be taken off and one of my small turrets placed there. Here's a second Scab steamer. The structure at the rear is a different shape and the turret is also different, but otherwise they're mostly the same. As the turrets are magnetised, they can be swapped with each other. The turrets are also the same design as those on the grot tanks, so all the turrets can be swapped around. Including the small turrets. Here we are, two Scab steamers that can be used for Scabs or used as a proxy for something for Warhammer 40K. Want to help support the channel? Then please like, comment, subscribe, share, join our Patreon, or buying through the Amazon or drive-thru links below helps support the channel at no cost to you.